Today, we're going to be continuing on with evolution and discussing how we classify organisms. How do we classify life? First, of course, I want you to go to the top of the Google Classroom page and sign in for your daily attendance. Make sure you answer questions as I review them every day. Questions related to what you hope to learn and what you need assistance on. Also, pay close attention to this lecture because there will be a quiz assigned today. How do we classify organisms? How do we classify life? We do this through taxonomy, a branch of science concerned with classifying living organisms. Now, Carl Linnaeus, he's known as the founder of modern taxonomy. We classify life by taxonomy. And Carl Linnaeus was a scientist during the 1700s. Classifying organisms will become a basic skill in science as you go up through the ranks and take higher level courses. We often know organisms or animals by their common name, what they would normally be called. For example, we have a mountain lion, or it could be called a cougar, puma, or panther. But we have a scientific name that's very specific to an individual organism. So a mountain lion, cougar, puma, panther, there's different variations of names, but its scientific name is just one, Puma concolor. In taxonomy, organisms are sorted by shared characteristics. In classifying organisms, we start from a very large range of shared characteristics, step down and down and down. We start with domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species being the most similar characteristics. And how do we label these organisms? By binomial nomenclature. Bi meaning two, nomial meaning name, nomenclature meaning system of naming. For an example, humans, we are Homo sapiens. So our genus would be Homo, and our species is sapiens. So we use genus and species to label organisms. And here's an example. We have our different ranks. We have a human and we have a sunflower. We have the different ranks that they fall in, and then of course we have our common name. See, Homo sapiens. Now let's take a look at domain going down to species. As I said, domain encompasses a very wide variety of animals, and that slowly gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as less characteristics are shared until we have an individual animal who is its own species. How do we classify an organism that's unknown? We do this by use of a dichotomous key. We use a series of paired statements to describe organism characteristics. Statements usually describe physical characteristics organisms do or don't have. Now here's an example of a dichotomous key. We start out with a vertebrate. It's sort of like a chart to find what kind of animal it is. So a vertebrate is an animal with a backbone, right? A spine. So we're vertebrates. We have a backbone. And then you'd ask yourself, does the animal have fur? Yes. Then it's a mammal. Does it have feathers? Or if it doesn't have fur, does it have feathers? Yes. Then a bird. If not, then you get down to Could it be a reptile? And then all the way down to answering questions related to whether it's a fish or amphibian. And this is an example of a dichotomous key. Important vocabulary terms to know as we proceed are clade, a group of species that includes a single common ancestor. A common ancestor meaning that these species have resulted from offspring of this ancestor going back many, many years. The clade includes all descendants, all that come after the ancestor, living and extinct. Extinct, no longer around, no longer living on the planet. Clades must be a grouping of a single common ancestor in all descendants. Now let's look at how we demonstrate a clade. We use cladograms. They're diagrams showing a clade. They link groups of organisms, and they show how evolutionary lines branch from a common ancestor. They can be shown in a few different ways. And the cladogram on the left, we have a common ancestor that's shown at the stem. Think of this as like a flower. And eventually, species C branched off, then species B, and then species A. The same thing is shown on the right in a different form. We show a common ancestor, species C broke off, and then we see species A and B broke off from a separate common ancestor, but like we talked in the last lecture, all three of these species have a common ancestor at the beginning. Here's an example of a specific cladogram. We start with a common ancestor, and throughout millions of years, different organisms, insects, fish, evolved and split off, and eventually humans evolved. Now, we're going to examine phylogenetic trees. These are a little bit different than cladograms, and they show actual representation of evolutionary paths of organism. So each organism along the path of evolution is shown, as seen in this chart. So we can trace where specific animals have come from in this phylogenetic tree of cats. Now let's talk about those domains of life we were talking about. Organisms are grouped into 3 domains. The 3 domains are known as the tree of life. We have bacteria. We've talked about bacteria before. Archaea. This one's a new one to you most likely. And eukarya. Let's take a look at what those terms mean. The domain bacteria, as you might imagine, includes all members of bacteria and are unicellular, meaning they have one cell, and prokaryotic. And now, do you remember what that means? Yeah, so that means that these unicellular organisms have no nucleus. They have no centralized center for their DNA, their genetic material. And the domain of bacteria include all common bacteria. How about domain archaea? Well, domain archaea are also unicellular and prokaryotic, meaning that they are one-celled and they have no nucleus. And usually they can be found in extreme environments. Think of volcanoes and boiling hot springs. They have to be really tough in a way to survive. And then we're left with the domain eukarya. Organisms that have nuclei in their cell. They have a nucleus. They have a central center for the DNA, the hard drive of our life, we could call it. And humans are in the domain eukarya. We are composed of cells that all have a nuclei, that have nucleus. That ends our lecture today. Now, I would like you to go on to the next assignment today. It will be a quiz. Please finish that before Thanksgiving break. It will be due tonight. And I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving break and look forward to seeing you back after. Thank you.